Last time, we explored the what-if scenario where Sir Alex Ferguson never retired. With arguably the greatest Premier League manager of all time remaining at the helm of England's biggest footballing powerhouse, Manchester United successfully avoided the disastrous David Moyes season. However, even with Ferguson, they couldn't completely hold off the inevitable decline. A flattering second-place finish exposed the old guard, while the sale of Wayne Rooney to Chelsea fired Jose Mourinho straight to the Premier League title. With a new generation emerging and a massive summer transfer window on the horizon, Ferguson finds himself navigating one of the most unpredictable periods in Premier League history, while he's determined to return Manchester United to the top. We now move into FIFA 15 and FIFA 16, continuing the story into what would have been the Louis van Gaal era, a dull yet entertaining period in the club's history, defined by significant change that forever altered Manchester United's future. On May 19, 2014, just a month after David Moyes' dismissal, Manchester United officially announced the appointment of Louis van Gaal. The former Barcelona and Bayern Munich manager had just guided the Netherlands to a third-place finish at the World Cup and was seen as a perfect man for the job. After the disastrous spell under David Moyes, United believed that they needed an experienced, proven winner with a commanding presence to restore the club to its former glory, and Van Gaal fit that profile perfectly. Unlike Moyes, the Dutchman carried instant authority, having won league titles all across Europe and a Champions League crown to his name. But more importantly, he was seen as a man to stabilize the club's long-term future. With several experienced leaders departing, Van Gaal's proven track record of promoting and developing young talents like Thomas Müller, Holger Badstuber, and David Alaba at Bayern Munich made him the ideal candidate for United's rebuild. Unfortunately, Van Gaal's time at the club brought mixed results with a bizarre and ultimately unsuccessful rebuild. Heading into the 2014-15 season, United were still reeling from the disaster of the previous year and in desperate need of rejuvenation. And Louis van Gaal was up for the challenge. He was determined to move the club past the Ferguson era and leave his own imprint on the squad. It began with a wave of departures, as several of Ferguson's most trusted players made way. Longtime veterans Rio Ferdinand, Nemanja Vidic, and Patrice Evra had already departed on free transfers before Van Gaal's arrival. Then loyal servant Darren Fletcher was allowed to move on in January, while one of Ferguson's final signings, Shinji Kagawa, returned to Borussia Dortmund for a fraction of his original fee. More significantly, Van Gaal's determination to assert his authority over the rebuild led to the exits of fan favorites like Danny Welbeck and Javier Hernandez, as well as the young winger Wilfried Zaha. In hindsight, all three went on to enjoy strong careers elsewhere. Welbeck's athleticism, versatility, and work rate saw him enjoy a solid Premier League career with Arsenal and later Brighton Hove Albion, while Hernandez's poaching instincts saw him score 26 goals in a season with Bayer Leverkusen, and Zaha turned into one of the league's most electric wingers at Crystal Palace. Instead of utilizing their talents as part of a long-term project, United spent the following years searching the market for replacements that never quite fit. Unlike the previous season, Ed Woodward fully backed the manager, smashing United's transfer record and spending nearly $200 million in a single window. The club broke the British transfer record to sign Angel Di Maria from Real Madrid for $75 million, then followed it up by setting a new record for the most expensive teenager in history, signing Luke Shaw for €37.5 million. United also finally secured Ander Herrera a year after Moyes' initial pursuit, while adding Daley Blind, Marcos Rojo, and Radamel Falcao on an expensive loan deal, with the Colombian striker coming off a serious ACL injury. Unfortunately, United's new recruits failed to make a positive impact, as the team endured a season that was decent on paper but ultimately frustrating. Van Gaal did manage to guide United back to the Champions League with a fourth-place finish, but their embarrassing exits from both domestic cup competitions extended the club's trophy drought since Ferguson's retirement. While a return to Europe's elite competition was an important step forward, Van Gaal's rigid and uninspiring style left supporters unconvinced. His brand of football was aimless possession with very little attacking intent, leading to Old Trafford crowds beginning the now infamous "attack, attack, attack, attack" chant. Meanwhile, Van Gaal's eccentric and often arrogant personality, paired with his bold decision-making, led to several high-profile fallouts. Record signing Angel Di Maria clashed multiple times with the manager after being played out of position and struggling with off-field issues. He left after just one season, publicly labeling Van Gaal as the worst coach that he had ever had. Others, including Rafael, Javier Hernandez, and even Robin van Persie, despite their strong history together with the Dutch national team, voiced similar complaints. While a few youngsters such as Tyler Blackett and Patrick McNair benefited from him, Van Gaal's decision to sell future Premier League regular Michael Keane in favor of those two summed up his poor judgment in squad building. Unfortunately, Van Gaal's combative management evaded Wayne Rooney, as he continued the mistake that Ferguson had been on the verge of avoiding. The Dutchman doubled down on United's decision to retain the aging star, naming him captain, making him a central figure in his squad. Rooney became Van Gaal's main man throughout his tenure, with the Englishman later calling him the best manager he'd ever played for. Van Gaal in turn called Rooney the greatest captain he ever had, surpassing Danny Blind, the captain of Ajax's 1995 Champions League winning side. But Van Gaal's faith was misplaced. Rooney's influence on the pitch was waning, as he could do very little to prevent the manager's reign from souring. And so we return to our story in a very different reality, one where Ferguson had already avoided this looming issue, preparing instead for a pivotal 2014 summer window. A year after agreeing to remain Manchester United manager until at least 2016, the landscape of the club was once again shifting. After failing to retain their title, the longtime core of the squad had officially passed its expiration date, ushering in a new generation at Old Trafford. The true greatness of Ferguson has always been his ability to adapt and evolve with the times, from refreshing his backroom staff to adjusting his tactics and introducing new blood into the squad. There's a reason that he's managed to stay on top for so long, and of course, he would continue to evolve. While he'd refrain from making too many staff changes or altering his tactics, he'd recognize the need to continue building a new core capable of maintaining United's winning mentality. While Ferguson was known for his ruthlessness, famously moving on from club legends like Beckham, Keane, and now Rooney, he was never opposed from keeping veterans, provided that they maintained the right attitude and professionalism. Players such as Giggs and Scholes had earned their longevity thanks to their dedication to the club, and Ferguson would once again be open to extending that same trust. True to his long-standing policy of offering only short-term deals to aging players, he considered new contracts for Michael Carrick, Nemanja Vidic, Rio Ferdinand, and Patrice Evra. First up was Carrick, who was an easy decision as he was still a vital part of the midfield. Next, the iconic duo of Rio Ferdinand and Nemanja Vidic, though well past their physical peak and increasingly injury-prone, were kept on for another year to help mentor the developing partnership of Chris Smalling and Phil Jones. As for Patrice Evra, Ferguson ultimately decided to let him leave for free to Juventus, due to the Frenchman's desire for a larger role that was unavailable thanks to Leighton Baines. As for the rest of the squad, Ferguson avoided stripping the team of its identity and DNA as Van Gaal did. Both Javier Hernandez and Danny Welbeck were coming off solid seasons, although it was clear that neither would ever develop into elite forwards. Still, Ferguson valued their professionalism and their distinct skills, keeping them as key squad players for years to come. Similarly, Kagawa enjoyed an excellent season and would stay the starter, while Zaha was developing into the kind of quick, direct winger that Ferguson always loved. Academy graduate Adnan Januzaj didn't have the breakout year he managed in real life, but he was still impressive with the step up he made in the first team. In real life, Januzaj's inconsistency and attitude problems derailed his United career. But under Ferguson's guidance and authority, the Belgian would avoid that fate, developing the professionalism and work ethic needed to thrive at a club of United's stature. Unfortunately, the progression of Zaha and Januzaj left little room for Tom Ince. As a result, the promising winger became the only departure in the summer, joining Watford on loan to gain experience and earn a potential path back to the first team. With the departure settled, Ferguson turned his attention to reinforcements, starting with the defense, which had begun to show cracks from the previous season. After missing out on several key targets last summer, Ferguson and David Gill revisited their short list of center backs. With the top target Matt Hummels still unavailable and promising Frenchman Mangala's price tag still too big, United finally struck a deal for Ezekiel Garay, beating Zenit to the Argentinian signature for €60 million. To complete the defensive overhaul, Ferguson once again turned to youth, breaking the transfer record for a teenager with a €37.5 million signing of Luke Shaw. With the 29-year-old Leighton Baines still starting at left back, Luke Shaw was viewed as a long-term successor, set to develop into a top defender. And finally, with Rooney gone and Van Persie entering his twilight years, Ferguson knew he needed a new world-class forward for the future. Fortunately, the perfect opportunity emerged, following Real Madrid's signing of James Rodriguez. So for a club record fee, Angel Di Maria arrived at Old Trafford to great fanfare. Undoubtedly world-class, he was the perfect Ferguson player, hard-working, explosive on the counter, and capable of producing magical moments. In real life, Di Maria's time at Manchester United was miserable. Never truly wanting to leave Madrid, he struggled to settle in England, and often clashed with Van Gaal. However, Ferguson's strength had always been his ability to understand players and adapt his management style to their personalities. And after such a major investment, he would never alienate Di Maria. While the Argentine's dislike for England's culture and weather was inevitable, Ferguson's man management would have kept him committed, at least for the time being. With an arm around the shoulder and a supportive approach, Ferguson would without question get the best out of Di Maria, as United's revamp had them once again looking like genuine title contenders. But the further we go in this timeline, the wider the ripple effects begin to spread. The summer of 2014 would see the first major change in the timeline. With the Manchester United job unavailable and Van Gaal still eager to return to club management after the World Cup, the Dutchman was forced to look elsewhere. After initial talks with Tottenham, Van Gaal was briefly considered for the job in North London, but Spurs would ultimately appoint Mauricio Pochettino instead. Left without a Premier League option, the Dutchman turned his attention to Italy, taking over Inter Milan. Now under ambitious new ownership, and having burned through half a dozen managers since the 2010 treble, Inter were desperate to make a statement appointment, and Van Gaal fit the bill. He was immediately backed in the transfer market, with the club promising further investment if he could guide them back to the Champions League. As a result, several players who joined Van Gaal's United in real life, like Daley Blind, Marcus Rojo, and Victor Valdez, would instead find themselves at the San Siro. Meanwhile, Ferguson had no interest in pursuing a short-term loan deal for Radamel Falcao, and unfortunately, Inter lacked the pull to sign the Colombian, leaving Real Madrid to take him on a season-long loan deal to bolster their front line. Toni Kroos still ended up at Real Madrid, while David Moyes had been close to signing him for Manchester United before being sacked in real life. Ferguson never pursued the deal in this timeline. Finally, with Mourinho satisfied with Rooney up top at Chelsea, Loic Remy would instead land at another London club, Arsenal. And so with the window shut, Sir Alex Ferguson's squad for the 2014-15 season was set, with a blend of familiar faces and fresh arrivals, with new signings like Shaw, Garay, and Di Maria expected to play key roles, while many of Ferguson's trusted squad players remained, as he prepared to grind out another push for a Premier League title. United opened their season by welcoming Swansea City to Old Trafford on a sunny afternoon. It was a highly anticipated opener, with their new number 7 Angel Di Maria making his debut alongside fellow Argentine Ezequiel Garay, as fans finally got a glimpse of Ferguson's summer reinforcements. It was a victorious opening day weekend for Manchester United, with new captain Michael Carrick opening the scoring with a header. Robin Van Persie kicked his season off with a goal, showing that he still had plenty left in the tank. Adnan Januzaj impressed in his cameo appearance, and was unlucky not to win a penalty after being taken out in the box. But the 2 goals were enough for United to secure all 3 points, to what was an encouraging start that hinted at a potential title charge. The win over Swansea sparked an almost perfect start to the league campaign, with United winning 7 out of their first 8 matches. The run featured a 5-0 thrashing of QPR at Old Trafford, and a 2-0 victory at the King Power Stadium, where Di Maria netted his first goal for the club. It also included a Van Persie hat-trick and a 3-1 win over Everton, as the Dutchman showed no signs of slowing down. The run culminated in a showdown against the reigning champions at Old Trafford, with United sitting top of the table 4 points clear of Chelsea. It marked the return of Wayne Rooney, who had now formed a deadly strike partnership with the bruising Diego Costa. Yet, it wasn't either of Chelsea's star forwards who made the breakthrough, as the Brazilian winger Willian opened the scoring just 8 minutes in. A clever run and finish from United's talisman Robin Van Persie brought the game level in the second half, setting up a tense finale that looked like it would end in a draw. Yet Rooney nearly punished his former side for the second year running, only to be denied by a brilliant recovery tackle from Chris Smalling, who preserved the point for Manchester United. The match ended 1-1, keeping United top of the table on goal difference as they prepared for the Manchester derby. At the Etihad, City struck first through David Silva, who capitalized on some sloppy defending to finish past his compatriot David De Gea. But once again, Van Persie came to United's rescue, hurling himself through the air to score a towering header to draw his side level. City kept pressing and Smalling went from hero to villain after a reckless challenge earned himself a red card. Still, United held firm under relentless pressure, with De Gea and his defense producing a gritty display to secure a hard-fought point. Unfortunately, after a routine win over Norwich, United's title charge hit its first major setback at the Emirates. A 2-1 defeat to Arsene Wenger's Arsenal handed them their first loss of the season, and marked the first time that Ferguson had lost 3 times in a row to Wenger since 2002. To make matters worse, Robin Van Persie, who had scored against his former club, pulled up clutching his hamstring late into the game. Scans the following day confirmed the worst, a torn hamstring that would keep him sidelined for 2 months. Danny Welbeck also picked up a knock in the same match, leaving United suddenly short of options up front. The sudden injury crisis up top was, in hindsight, unsurprising. United had been grinding through a tough Champions League group, featuring Borussia Dortmund and surprise entrants Fiorentina. Despite failing to beat Dortmund, including a disappointing 1-0 loss at home to Cagua's former club, United scraped through the group thanks to Chicharito's late heroics in Florence, where his super sub goal sealed a dramatic 3-2 victory on the final match day. That result and late goal secured a second-place finish in the group, earning United a tough round of 16 draw against French champions Paris Saint-Germain. Back in the league, injuries up front forced Ferguson to turn to academy graduate James Wilson during the congested holiday fixtures, and to everyone's surprise, the youngster burst onto the scene with a brace and a narrow 2-1 win over Fulham, as United went unbeaten heading into the new year. Wilson's breakthrough continued as he scored a late winner against Liverpool, announcing himself on the big stage, while Di Maria's brilliant solo goal against Tottenham secured all 3 points at White Hart Lane. United closed out 2014 6 points clear at the top of the table, thanks in large part to the unexpected emergence of James Wilson. Unfortunately, Ferguson's side stumbled out of the gates in the new year, failing to win a single match in January before regaining their form in February. By then, however, the damage was done, as their lead had evaporated, with rivals Manchester City overtaking them at the top of the table. Meanwhile, the boost of Van Persie's return was immediately overshadowed by a season-ending injury to Javier Hernandez, just as United were preparing for their Champions League clash against PSG. Unfortunately for Ferguson, the clash against the French champions marked the beginning of the end for United's season. A disappointing 3-2 loss at Old Trafford not only left them on the brink of elimination, but it also saw their new star man Angel Di Maria suffer a knee injury after a controversial non-penalty decision. It was unclear whether Thiago Silva got the man of the ball first, and just moments later a misplaced pass from Leighton Baines led to Verratti intercepting the ball before being tripped by Januzaj. With their best player limping off injured, United headed into Paris at a serious disadvantage. Before they could even settle into the second leg, PSG struck first, with Lucas Moura pouncing on a rebound from Zlatan Ibrahimovic's shot that bounced off the post. Yet replay suggested a hint of offsides, as PSG benefited from another potentially controversial goal. Despite Di Maria coming off the bench to play through his injury and pull one back for United, Zlatan sealed the tie with a nice finish late on, bringing a disappointing Champions League campaign to an early end in Paris. Out of the Champions League and with their title charge fading, Ferguson feared his side was once again running out of steam heading into the final stretch of a season. But just like the previous year, the League Cup presented a chance to salvage their season. And once again, it was the next generation that rose to the occasion, battling through a brutal gauntlet to reach the final, overcoming Tottenham, Arsenal, and Chelsea along the way. While the likes of Januzaj, Zaha, Lingard, and Wilson all seized their opportunity to impress, with Wilson in particular using the competition as a springboard for his first-team career, an intriguing battle was unfolding at center back. Under the guidance of Ferdinand and Vidic, the young trio of Tyler Blackett, Patrick McNair, and Michael Keane were battling it out in the League Cup for a place in Ferguson's first-team plans. Ferguson saw real potential in each player, but knew only one could make the leap, and for the next few seasons, he'd be watching them closely to see who had the mentality and talent to step into United's defense. After falling short against Tottenham, United returned to the League Cup final, this time facing West Brom. With an eye in the future, Ferguson handed start to Januzaj and Zaha. But it would be the ever-reliable Robin van Persie who opened the scoring, finishing smartly after a brilliant back heel from Kagawa. United's next generation eventually took center stage, as Yanazai's solo run saw him seal the victory with a composed finish to make it 2-0, capping off the perfect cup final for Ferguson's side. The final ended 2-0, securing United's first trophy since their 20th Premier League title in 2013. As club captain Michael Carrick lifted the cup, it felt like the perfect piece of silverware to collect in Ferguson's ongoing rebuild. It was a clear sign that United's next generation was finally beginning to arrive. With one domestic cup secured, United couldn't make it a double, bowing out of the FA Cup in the quarter-finals against Stoke City. That left only the league to play for, but once again they found themselves in a familiar position, despite a stunning 5-2 demolition of Liverpool at Anfield, which featured an electric display from Danny Welbeck and yet another goal from James Wilson. Their title charge ultimately fell apart. A 1-0 defeat at St. James's Park thanks to a Papa Cisse strike, which also included a long-term injury to captain Michael Carrick, along with the arrival of Harry Kane on the big stage in a 2-1 defeat at Old Trafford, saw United suffer through an inconsistent month of March. And following a 3-0 win over Aston Villa, United topped the table only thanks to games played, as they headed towards a title-deciding showdown against Manchester City. Despite Ferguson's best efforts, his side simply ran out of gas. A rare goal from defensive midfielder Fernando sealed a crucial win for Manchester City, effectively ending United's title hopes. Yet United would end their season on a strong note, with statement wins over Chelsea and Arsenal before a 5-0 thrashing of Fulham on the final day. The Arsenal clash was the end of an era, with Rio Ferdinand's final appearance of the club ending fittingly, as Robin van Persie scored the game winner against his former side in Rio's final match. And at the season's end, United once again found themselves in a deceiving position, just 4 points behind champions Manchester City, who had eased off in the final weeks of the campaign. It was a bitter pill to swallow watching their noisy neighbours lift a Premier League trophy, but even before City's celebrations ended, Ferguson was already plotting United's return to the top, with the 2015-16 campaign looking like it could be their season. But back in real life, with Manchester City and Chelsea enduring down seasons, and the North London clubs unable to legitimately contend, Louis van Gaal and Manchester United had a clear path to the title. Yet the 2015-16 Premier League campaign instead delivered one of football's greatest ever fairy tales, with Leicester City's 15,000-1 triumph. The Foxes won the league with the 6th slowest points tally in Premier League history, while Van Gaal's United limped to 5th place, missing out on Champions League football and managing just 49 goals all season. The already uninspiring football grew even duller as Van Gaal continued to alienate his squad. From publicly criticizing key players to inexplicably freezing out others, his reign at the club was failing. Nothing captured the dysfunction more than another bizarre summer window, filled with underwhelming signings and the exit of key players. Record signing Angel Di Maria left the club after just 1 year. Former Golden Boot winner Robin van Persie was pushed out, and several Ferguson-era stalwarts followed, stripping the club of its remaining identity. Van Gaal now looked like a far cry from the perfect appointment he appeared to be in the summer of 2014. What United needed was stability and a manager willing to rehabilitate the still capable core of the Ferguson era. Instead, Van Gaal's stubbornness drove useful players away. He famously told Javier Hernandez that he had a 1% chance of playing, and proceeded to sell him after ruining his confidence, only to watch him score 26 goals in Germany. Meanwhile, most of his signings proved to be, at best, mediocre. Most players signed under him would soon be discarded by the next manager, as United continued to endlessly rebuild. And so, despite winning the 2016 FA Cup, United's first piece of silverware since Ferguson's retirement, Van Gaal was sacked just 2 days later, with the high-profile appointment of Jose Mourinho set to replace him. But returning to our story, will Leicester City pull off their fairy tale? Or can Ferguson derail the underdog's dream on the road to United's 21st Premier League title? By the summer of 2015, Sir Alex Ferguson could sense a shift in the game. Dortmund's suffocating performance against his side in the previous season only reinforced his growing belief in the rising influence of pressing systems in the modern game. So Ferguson began reshaping his backroom staff to inject some fresh ideas and modernize the club's approach. With a new generation of progressive coaches on board, he evolved his traditional 4-4-2 into a modern, high-intensity system built around structured pressing. With his tactical evolution underway, Ferguson entered the market determined to add some energy and physicality to his side. And his top target was Belgian midfielder Raja Nainggolan, who was in the middle of negotiating a contract extension at Roma. Instead, David Gaal swooped in to strike a €42.5 million deal with the Italian club, while Ferguson personally convinced the dynamic midfielder to turn down the new contract and join the project at Old Trafford. And so, United got their man, who many dubbed the new Roy Keane. And the comparison was fitting. Not since the Irishman's departure had Ferguson possessed such a fiery, relentless midfield enforcer. Nainggolan was a perfect fit for United's new direction. His all-action, hard-tackling style suited the high-intensity press that Ferguson was introducing, while his energy and bite perfectly complemented the composure of Carrick, or the dynamism of Herrera in a perfect two-man midfield. With his final signing of the window, Ferguson once again turned to Merseyside to poach another Everton fullback. After a €23 million bid, he convinced Irish international Seamus Coleman to make the move to Old Trafford, adding his energy and work rate to the right side of United's defense. The only other addition was Tom Ince, returning from a promising season at relegated Watford, where he scored 7 Premier League goals, which earned him one final chance to prove himself at Old Trafford. As for outgoings, there were no major first-team departures. Instead, it's worth looking at the players that Ferguson chose to keep, all of whom Van Gaal sold in real life. The biggest name that Ferguson held on to was Angel Di Maria. The Scot openly acknowledged the Argentine's turbulent first season in England. But unlike Van Gaal, he believed that Di Maria was finally settling in and ready for a breakout year under his guidance. Then there's Robin van Persie. In real life, a key reason he joined United in 2012 was Ferguson's promise that he'd stay for 3 more years, a promise that was obviously cut short. But in this timeline, Ferguson intends to honor that commitment. Van Persie's injuries had begun to take a toll as he featured in just 24 matches in the previous year. But his return to 15 goals in the limited minutes showed that he still had plenty to offer. So rather than selling him, Ferguson plans to manage his workload across the campaign. That's where Javi Hernandez, Danny Welbeck, and the breakout star James Wilson come into play, as their rotation will be crucial to keeping Van Persie fresh. Wilson in particular is set for a major season after scoring 15 goals across all competitions, although Ferguson remains wary of him. He wants to see more consistency before handing the promising forward the vacant number 9 shirt. Meanwhile, Zaha's been impressing over the previous 2 seasons. Despite still being raw, Ferguson sees a big future at United for the winger, which can also be said for Januzaj. Kagawa is coming off his best season yet as the club's top goal scorer last season with 16 goals. But Ferguson's shift towards a more intense physical pressing system could cut into his minutes. His defensive shortcomings were exposed last year, which is a potential issue to watch closely. Finally, several squad players have been retained for the title push. Johnny Evans remains as a trusted figure, while Ferguson was reportedly stunned in real life when Van Gaal let him go. While Raphael may be out of form, he offers depth at right back, and Tom cleverly provides a steady, if limited, midfield cover. While Ferguson has stood by Darren Fletcher for years while he dealt with illness and injury, he won't play a major role this season, but Ferguson's loyalty gives him one final season to recover before moving on. One of the few bright spots of the Van Gaal era was the sheer number of debutants, even if his poor squad building often forced his hand. But in this timeline, Ferguson won't be relying on inexperienced youngsters out of desperation. But there is one talent quietly waiting in the wings. But speaking of Van Gaal, fresh off of securing Champions League qualification with Inter, he continued his project at the San Siro, with Memphis Depay, Matteo Darmian, and Bastian Schweinsteiger all joining him at the San Siro. Elsewhere, with United out of the race, Arsenal had a clear path to sign Morgan Schneiderlin, while Sergio Romero made the switch to Sevilla. And although Ferguson had been investing in youth and would certainly have been scouting him, he would not move for Anthony Martial. The hefty fee for a player with only one full senior season was too steep for the Scot, leaving the young Frenchman to continue his development at Monaco. And so, with the 2015 summer window closed, Ferguson entered the final year of his contract determined to reclaim the Premier League crown. After falling short in the previous 2 seasons, his 2015-16 squad finally looked like it added the missing pieces needed to deliver title number 21. The new campaign opened with a showdown between Sir Alex Ferguson and Mauricio Pochettino, which was United's first look at the new emerging Tottenham side built around England's next big superstar Harry Kane. But the young Spurs' inexperience showed, as a red card swung the momentum, allowing United to overcome a 2-0 deficit. Ashley Young was the unlikely hero, as the winger scored twice, including a brilliant solo run, before Robin van Persie sealed a 3-2 victory with a classic poacher's finish. It was a statement performance to kick off United's title charge, with their old Dutchman proving he still had plenty left in the tank. Outside of conceding a late equalizer at home to Newcastle, United enjoyed a near-perfect start to the campaign with 3 wins and a draw. They ended August in second place after 4 matches, and one of just 4 unbeaten teams in the league. A visit from Liverpool followed, and thanks to the brilliance of Di Maria, United tore through their historic rivals in a 4-1 win. The Argentine struck twice and added a pinpoint assist for Van Persie, as United's new number 7 finally announced his arrival. Following 2 more wins, United headed to North London on a sunny day, top of the table and looking to extend their lead. Arsene Wenger had been getting the best of Ferguson in recent years, and the showdown predictably turned into a nasty affair, with both sides getting at each other. But it was former gunner Robin van Persie who struck first, catching Petr Cech off guard with a bizarre low free kick that the experienced keeper failed to deal with, giving United a 1-0 lead. But Wenger's side found resilience to peg back United. Schneiderlin headed the Gunners level after De Gea was caught in no man's land on a corner. But United would have the final say. Di Maria, once again the difference maker, reacted quickest to Van Persie's rebound effort and slid home the winner for a 2-1 victory. Loic Remy nearly stole a point late on, but De Gea redeemed himself for his earlier mistake, with a sharp save to seal the result as United left the Emirates with all 3 points. The following game saw United head to Goodison Park, with David Moyes' side giving them trouble after Marouane Fellaini's opener gave the Toffees the lead. But following a Wilfried Zaha equalizer in the second half, United finally opened the game with super sub Chicharito returning from injury to do what he does best, snatch a late winner for Manchester United. The game finished in Ferguson's favor, as the Scots' faith in his squad paid off, with 2 players who would have been cast aside in another timeline coming up big at the always tricky Goodison Park. United carried that momentum in the first Manchester derby of the season. They were hungry for revenge against the reigning champions, and thanks to Ferguson's careful rotation up top, a well-rested Van Persie delivered the decisive blow in a hard-fought 1-0 win. Ferguson's side was flying until disaster struck. A 3-1 victory in the following match came at a cost as De Gea suffered a hip flexor injury, ruling him out for 2 months. Still, United managed to grind out results, setting the stage for an unexpected early season title clash against the story of the year, Leicester City. Powered by the world-class trio of Jamie Vardy, Riyad Mahrez, and N'Golo Kante, Leicester had taken the league by storm. After 13 games, they sat just 6 points behind Manchester United, and remarkably, they remained unbeaten. But their title credentials are about to receive their biggest test yet. Ferguson's United started the season in ruthless form, winning 12 and drawing just 1 game, setting up the biggest match of the season so far. United arrived at the King Power Stadium on a cold, rainy night looking to extend their lead at the top of the table to 9 points, while Leicester, in the form of their lives, were determined to prove that they were genuine title contenders. Ferguson named virtually his strongest 11 with only 2 enforced changes. The injured David De Gea made way for Anders Lingard, while the young Luke Shaw stepped in for suspended Leighton Baines. The first half started brightly for the neutrals, with both sides pushing for a breakthrough and refusing to settle for a draw. But the match took a controversial turn when Leicester were awarded a highly questionable penalty. Replay suggested that Nainggolan's knee got the ball before Kante in the challenge, leaving the fiery Belgian livid as the referee pointed to the spot. Jamie Vardy, the breakout star of the season, made no mistake, smashing his penalty straight down the middle to give Leicester a massive, if highly disputed, lead. The second half saw United come inches away from equalizing when Danny Welbeck struck the post. Moments later, Di Maria produced a moment of magic, gliding past the defender before producing a perfect through ball for Zaha, who cut inside and forced Schmeichel into a strong save, with Welbeck unable to pounce on the rebound. And just as all hope seemed gone, Ferguson's super sub delivered once again. Hernandez came off the bench to rescue a point with a 90th minute equalizer. United were seconds away from their first defeat of the season, but once again, Ferguson's foresight paid off. It was virtually the last kick of the match, and the game finished 1-1 with both sides still unbeaten and no ground gain in the title race. But for Ferguson, it was unmistakable proof that Leicester were the real deal. His traditional rivals might be having down years, but title number 21 was not going to be a stroll. The Leicester match seemed to rattle Ferguson's side, who went on to draw 3 of the final 5 games of 2015, including a gut punch of a moment when Stoke City Shaqiri scored an absolute screamer and contender of goal of the season, as United drew at the Stadium of Light. They steadied themselves with a narrow 1-0 win over a dreadful Chelsea side, with a goal that was created by Zaha and finished by Di Maria. They then opened the new year with a commanding 3-0 victory against Swansea. Even so, their once comfortable lead had vanished thanks to a run of costly draws that left United level on points with Leicester City heading into 2016. But in the other competitions, United couldn't defend their League Cup trophy, crashing out of the round of 16 to Stoke City. Over in Europe, the Red Devils only just scraped through their tricky Champions League group that included Ferguson's old side Aberdeen. An uncharacteristic loss in Lisbon and a string of draws against Sporting and Aberdeen, including a late equalizer at the very club that Ferguson built his legacy at, nearly saw them repeat the disastrous 2011-2012 group stage exit. Disaster was ultimately avoided thanks to a crucial double over Louis van Gaal's Inter Milan, including a gritty 1-0 win at the San Siro, sealed by a composed finish by none other than the center-back Chris Smalling. Despite finishing second in the group, United ended up with a kinda round of 16 draw facing Zenit. Meanwhile, Inter got rewarded with their record holders, Real Madrid. Unfortunately, the turn of the new year saw the injury bug strike again. Wilfried Zaha suffered a broken fibula that would rule him out for nearly the entire remainder of the season. It was a cruel blow for the young winger, just as he was finally finding his feet and earning a regular starting role. But the campaign had to push on, and United traveled to Anfield for a major showdown. The match seemed destined to end in a draw until Mamadou Sakho's reckless challenge earned himself a red card and handed United a lifeline. Former Evertonian Leighton Baines buried the resulting penalty, and despite a late scare from Adam Lallana, Ferguson's men were able to escape with all 3 points. The next game delivered even more late drama, but this time United could only salvage a draw as Adnan Januzaj fired a brilliant strike from outside the box. But a trip to Stanford Bridge offered the perfect chance for United to get back on winning ways, and an opportunity for Ferguson to take advantage of a faltering Mourinho side. It also marked a shift in approach. Kagawa's defensive frailties saw him drop from the starting 11, with Di Maria moving into the number 10 role and the more athletic Danny Welbeck playing out wide. The adjustment paid off immediately as Welbeck's driven cross was turned into his own net by Kurt Zouma, and a Van Persie penalty, his 13th goal of the season, secured a commanding 2-0 win at Stanford Bridge. A run of victories that followed was nearly undone at the Stadium of Light, where United fell 2-0 behind to Sunderland. A smashing finish from Nangolan and a bit of fortune from a foul drawn by little-used winger Tom Ince allowed United to snatch a 90th minute equalizer and maintain their unbeaten record. That streak, however, came to an abrupt end. An early red card against West Brom derailed United's hopes for an invincible season, and a late strike from Stefan Sessegnon, combined with a dreadful error from David De Gea and a free kick, handed United their first defeat of the season. To make matters worse, a serious injury to Januzaj saw the Belgian join Zaha on the sidelines, and despite United's strong form, they couldn't reclaim the top spot in the Premier League. But Sir Alex Ferguson is considered the greatest for a reason. Another meeting with his old rival Arsene Wenger produced a perfect response, as the Scot masterminded a crucial bounce-back win. Goals from the wing duo of Ashley Young and Danny Welbeck sealed a massive 2-0 victory and all 3 points. The win kept United firmly in the title race, carrying them into mid-April with an impressive record of 23-7-1. Yet, despite rarely slipping in the league, Ferguson knew that the job was far from done. A massive 3-game stretch awaited that would define their chase for title number 21. But back in Europe, United eased past Zenit in the round of 16 of the Champions League to set up a rematch against Bayern Munich. It had been 2 years since that fateful night in Munich, where United crashed out on penalties. But now, Ferguson's side had a perfect chance at redemption, as they once again met Bayern Munich in the Champions League quarterfinals. The tie added another chapter to the developing rivalry between Ferguson and Guardiola, bringing their total meetings to 6. After 4 previous attempts, Ferguson had yet to defeat the Spaniard even once. And early on, it looked like that record would continue. Bayern sliced through United with ease, and Thomas Muller applied the finishing touch to put the visitors ahead. But just minutes later, Rajan Nainggolan dragged United back into the contest, driving forward and smashing home a brilliant equalizer past Manuel Neuer. Bayern, however, answered immediately. A contentious foul in the box by Antonio Valencia handed the Germans a penalty, and Muller calmly slotted his second of the night, catching De Gea off guard by firing it straight down the middle. And so, 8 minutes of complete madness ended with Bayern Munich leaving Old Trafford with a 2-1 advantage. But back in Munich, it only took 30 minutes for United to exercise their demons and flip the tie on its head. A brilliant solo run from Ashley Young gave United the lead just half an hour in. But after a Bayern Munich response, Seamus Coleman's long ball to Nainggolan allowed United to reclaim control almost immediately. Then another composed finish from the in-form Ashley Young pushed United even further ahead, as a veteran winger continued the season of his life. And to erase any remaining doubt, a counter-attack from Bayern Munich's corner saw Tom Ince score his first ever Champions League goal, simply rolling the ball into an empty net as Neuer was left stranded upfield. And with that, an astonishing 5-2 victory on the night delivered Ferguson his first ever victory over Guardiola, and more importantly, United overturned the first leg deficit, advancing 6-4 in aggregate. The semi-final draw set up a showdown versus Barcelona in the iconic MSN trio. But before that, United faced a decisive stretch in the league. A trip to the Etihad kicked off the final Manchester derby of the season, and the first of 3 massive clashes. And thanks to their European excursion, United were now 2 games and 7 points behind the leaders, Leicester City. With the title showdown against Leicester looming, there was no margin for error. And yet, City struck first through a moment of brilliance from Kevin De Bruyne, who sliced through United's midfield and squared it to Aguero for a finish. But United hit back instantly with a driving run from Danny Welbeck that produced a scrappy chance for Hernandez, who bundled it home. In the second half, the Mexican found himself unmarked and calmly slotted it past Willy Caballero to complete the comeback. United then traveled to White Hart Lane, needing another win before hosting Leicester City. A disastrous error from Hugo Lloris gifted them exactly that, securing 3 crucial points before setting the stage for a title decider. And so the big day finally arrived, with United looking to claw their way back to the top of the league. But it would be no easy task. They were up against the highest scoring team in the league and a side on the brink of making history. Ferguson made a tweak to his setup, shifting into a 4-3-3, with Nainggolan and Herrera operating ahead of Carrick in the midfield. But up top, United faced a growing problem. Robin van Persie's age finally begun to show. After a blistering start to the season, his form collapsed midway through the campaign, and he hadn't scored a goal since his penalty against Chelsea back in February. If United were going to reignite their title push, someone else would have to step up in the spotlight. But it would be Jamie Vardy who struck first for Leicester. Slipped through by Okazaki, he thundered his finish into the roof of the net, pushing the Foxes even closer to the fairytale ending. Although Manchester United had Angel Di Maria, who once again delivered. Cutting inside, he beat Kasper Schmeichel to drag United level and put Leicester firmly on the back foot. Ferguson and United had been in these moments countless times before, and their experience began to show as Leicester finally started to wobble. Eventually, Di Maria delivered again when it mattered most. Van Persie, who was still desperate to break his goal drought, unselfishly squared the ball to the Argentine to score the winner. Leicester had no response, and Ferguson had masterminded yet another comeback. And for the first time in months, United looked to be seizing back control of the title race as their inexperienced challengers began to crack. But in the Champions League semi-final, United's opponents were anything but inexperienced. They were facing truly an elite Barcelona side, powered by a legendary front three that featured one of the 2 greatest players of all time. Yet the game remained goalless heading into halftime, and it would be one of the most unlikeliest heroes who would find the breakthrough, as a surging run down the wing by Danny Welbeck picked out Tom Cleverley, who forced in a backheel to give United the lead. Yes, Tom Cleverley scored a decisive first-leg back-heel goal against the mighty Barcelona. And it proved to be priceless, as United carried a slim advantage with them into the Camp Nou for the second leg. At the Camp Nou, Barcelona wasted no time erasing United's first-leg lead. A spilled David De Gea save fell to Andres Iniesta, who slid in the opener to level the tie. But once again, an unlikely hero stepped forward. Ashley Young was isolated with no support from his teammates, but he dribbled his way through Barcelona's defense and smashed home a vital away goal. Barcelona pushed and pushed for a way back into the game, but United held firm. Ferguson was heading into the Champions League final for the 5th time in his career, as the night ended 2-1 to Manchester United. As the season approached its finale, United's youngsters once again pulled them back to Wembley. An FA Cup run that had featured the first minutes of Marcus Rashford had now carried them into the semi-finals. And at Wembley, a Mourinho-less Chelsea that was still reeling from the Portuguese manager's recent sacking was swept aside in the comfortable 3-1 win. And suddenly, United found themselves staring at a possibility of a treble. But competing on multiple fronts had left Ferguson's side running on fumes. And thankfully, his smart squad building and a helpful assistance from the academy allowed him to lean fully into his depth. Marcus Rashford's Premier League debut may have arrived later in this timeline, but it was no less memorable. The young Englishman came off the bench to score a dramatic late winner against Hull City, keeping United alive in the title race. Ferguson's squad management paid off again in the penultimate match against Aston Villa, which was wedged in between a brutal 5-day stretch to close out the final 3 games of the season. He rotated nearly the entire matchday squad to preserve his stars for the decisive finale. It was surely a gamble, even if 13th place Villa posed very little threat, as anything less than a win could hand Leicester City the title. Thankfully though, captain for the day Antonio Valencia burst through Villa's defense with a powerful run that put United ahead and set the tone for a routine win. Last season's breakout star James Wilson came off the bench to add one of his own, and academy product Jesse Lingard sealed it, capping off a 4-1 victory. United squad players had delivered when it mattered most, setting up a title-deciding last day. The table on the last day saw United top of the league by just 2 points. Due to Leicester City's goal difference, nothing but a win would secure the title for Manchester United. Should the Foxes beat Chelsea and United lose or draw, it would see the underdogs complete the greatest Premier League triumph in history. Manchester United hosted 17th place Burnley for the title decider. Even with Van Persie only scoring 1 goal since February and nearing the end of his United career, Old Trafford was expecting a title-clinching afternoon. Ferguson's gamble had paid off, as his entire starting 11 was fully rested, and their bench was stacked with difference makers. And the day got off to the perfect start, with Di Maria's chip finding Robin Van Persie, who finally broke his goal-scoring drought with an excellent one-time volley. Of course, if it had to be any day, it would be today, with United looking set for title number 21. But Burnley clearly hadn't read the script. A well-worked move saw the relegation contenders equalize with a header, threatening to derail United's coronation. Refusing to give up, United kept pushing for their title-winning goal, with Danny Welbeck blowing multiple chances to find it. But the story of the season was United and their late winners, and yet again an unlikely hero arrived, as Danny Welbeck finally beat former United Academy keeper Tom Heaton to score a 90th minute winner, and yet again a player Ferguson refused to discard proved him right. And with no time left for an equalizer, Sir Alex Ferguson and Manchester United had done it again. Title number 21 had finally arrived at Old Trafford, and in the process Ferguson had spoiled the Premier League's greatest ever fairy tale, but this was hardly his concern. A departing Robin Van Persie lifted the trophy. It was a culmination of a project that Ferguson had been building since the summer of 2013. He promised to stay on long enough to leave behind a side capable of succeeding after his time, and with the new title-winning core now in place, United's future had never looked brighter. But United and Ferguson couldn't look too far ahead, with 2 more trophies still up for grabs. First came another classic showdown with Arsene Wenger, who had quietly become an FA Cup specialist in the twilight of his career. But an early penalty conceded by Arsenal's Gabriel handed United control right from the start. And of course Van Persie punished his former club yet again. United wrapped up the final with Leighton Baines scoring his first non-penalty goal of the season, finishing with the composure of a striker to make it 2-0. And just like that, Ferguson completed a domestic double. 2 trophies in 2 weeks, and remarkably, United were now 2/3 of the way to an unlikely but undeniably historic treble. Not since the legendary 1998-99 season had Ferguson delivered a treble, with it being his only one of his career. Now, standing between him and his second treble, along with the 3rd Champions League title, was Real Madrid, the most dominant club in the competition's history. Each side arrived in Munich as worthy finalists. This formidable Real Madrid side had fought past Inter Milan, Atletico Madrid, and PSG to reach the Allianz Arena. Meanwhile, Ferguson named an unchanged 11 from the title-clinching win over Burnley, while Real Madrid fielded a star-studded lineup led by Cristiano Ronaldo, undoubtedly Ferguson's greatest ever player. United knew that they had to start fast, and they did that with Leighton Baines testing Keylor Navas from long range within minutes. But Cristiano Ronaldo answered with his trademark chop and strike that forced David De Gea into action. But the breakthrough came when Seamus Coleman's cross somehow evaded Pepe and found Ashley Young, who slid in to nudge United ahead in the Champions League final. It was a scrappy goal with it deflecting off a defender on the way in, but it was a priceless one. And now Madrid were looking to Ronaldo for him to rescue their final. But on the biggest stage, United kept him quiet. The Portuguese star struggled to find the equalizer that Madrid desperately needed. Yet with one last chance to rescue the game, it'd be James Rodriguez who'd miss Real Madrid's best and last chance for an equalizer, forcing a UCL winning save from the Spaniard David De Gea. Seconds later, the final whistle blew and confirmed that Manchester United were champions of Europe. No one expected this run in August, but after conquering Bayern Munich, Barcelona, and Real Madrid, United were certainly deserving winners. Ferguson's rebuild had hit its apex. He hoped to possibly win one more league title and leave with a strong foundation by 2016. Instead, just months away from his 30th year at the club, he was now the only ever manager to win 2 European trebles. And so the final season Ferguson had originally agreed to back in 2013 far surpassed every expectation, not only in terms of silverware, but in the success of his rebuild. Di Maria finally stepped into his role as United's number 7, Ashley Young produced a season of his life, and Van Persie bowed out as the club's top goal scorer. And countless squad players rose to the occasion when it mattered most. It was a perfect storm, helped by several of Ferguson's rivals suffering disastrous campaigns. But none of them would stay down for long. Each would regroup quickly and return for United's crown. Ferguson was now stepping into a completely new landscape, one shaped by new faces, massive spending, and shifting power dynamics, should he choose to continue as a Manchester United manager.